It happened during recess. The sky was clear, the kind of blue you only see in early spring, and the sound of children laughing echoed across the school playground. My daughter was playing tag, darting around the jungle gym with her pink sneakers flashing in the sun. She had just turned 6 the week before. I remember that morning so clearly. She had insisted on wearing her sparkly unicorn hoodie, even though it was warm. "For good luck, Daddy," she said. I watched her run, carefree and full of joy. Then it happened. One sound, sharp, deafening wrong. A single gunshot cut through the laughter like a blade. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Teachers froze. Children stopped mid-step. And then the screaming started. Chaos erupted as kids ran in every direction, some tripping, others crying, teachers yelling for everyone to get inside. And in the middle of it, my daughter, lying beside the monkey bars, motionless, blood spreading fast across the pavement beneath her. Her tiny hands twitched once, then went still. I ran. I don't remember how fast or how far. I just know I ended up on my knees beside her, yelling her name over and over. She was breathing, barely. Her eyes were half open, staring up at the clouds. Her lips moved, trying to speak, but no sound came. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Karen, standing just outside the chain-link fence. Calm, unbothered, holding the gun like it was a clipboard, and smiling. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She didn't even blink. She just stood there and watched, as if this was all part of some twisted plan. The teachers didn't recognize her at first. Some thought she was a parent, some thought she was lost. But I knew. I had seen her face too many times in our neighborhood. I had heard her voice scream at children for playing too loud, and now I was watching that same woman calmly wait as sirens screamed in the distance and my daughter bled on school grounds. But if you think this started at the playground, it didn't. It started like any other morning. My daughter woke up early, already dressed in her favorite unicorn hoodie and holding her backpack before I'd even finished brushing my teeth. "It's library day," she told me proudly, and I'm reading to the class. Her excitement was contagious. She was bouncing around the kitchen, humming a song from her cartoons, barely able to sit still long enough to eat breakfast. I remember watching her, thinking how fast she was growing, how full of light she was. She loved school, her teacher, her friends, even the cafeteria pizza. It was her safe space, the one place where I thought nothing could ever go wrong. We left a little early so she could play on the jungle gym before the bell. The playground was already buzzing. Kids chasing each other, laughing, backpacks scattered across the grass. It was one of those mornings that just felt good. Clean, bright. I stood near the fence for a few minutes, watching her swing with her friends, her giggle echoing above the noise. And then I saw her, Karen, across the street by the bushes near the parking lot. Just watching. Arms crossed, sunglasses on. That same stiff posture I knew all too well. She wasn't doing anything, not technically, just standing. But there was something about the way she looked through that fence, like she didn't see children, just targets. I'd seen her near the school before, once near the pickup line, once parked a little too long outside the library doors. Each time, she had some excuse, just walking my dog, waiting for a friend, looking for my lost keys. The staff didn't think much of it. She wasn't breaking any rules. She wasn't technically on school grounds, but something about it always sat wrong with me, like a shadow that didn't belong in the sunlight. Still, we brushed it off, because it was just Karen, and no one believed she would ever cross that line. But that morning, as my daughter waved goodbye and ran inside, I should have known the line was already gone. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she was an obsession wrapped in authority. She held onto her self-appointed power in the HOA like it was a sheriff's badge, and her favorite targets were families with children. It started subtly. She'd leave little typed-up reminder notices on mailboxes about kids leaving bikes on sidewalks, about chalk drawings that violated HOA appearance standards, about disruptive noise levels from laughter. She never signed her name, but everyone knew it was her. Her car was always parked just far enough down the street to watch, but not be seen, her windows cracked open, always listening. I got my first warning from her after my daughter had a birthday party in our backyard. 5 kids, some music, a small bouncy house. The next morning, we found a laminated note taped to our front door. Events must be registered with the HOA 14 days in advance. Repeated violations will result in fines. No name, no contact number, just fear. Then she began watching the school, not just from her porch, but from across the street, from her car, from behind hedges. Multiple parents noticed her, taking pictures through the fence while kids played. When confronted, she claimed she was documenting HOA member violations. One time, she even followed a group of elementary students walking home and scolded them for stepping on a patch of grass near her yard. When a teacher approached her, she pulled out a printout of HOA regulations, highlighted, underlined, color-coded. These rules apply to everyone, she insisted, even children. We tried to report her. I emailed the HOA board. I spoke to school staff. I even filed a non-emergency complaint with the local precinct. The response was always the same: shrugs, sighs, soft excuses. She's just eccentric. She hasn't technically broken any laws. We'll keep an eye on her. But nothing changed. Karen just got bolder. She started referring to the playground as a liability zone. She once told a substitute teacher, "I've warned you people enough. If no one listens, someone's going to get hurt." It was clear this wasn't about rules anymore. It wasn't about noise or lawns or fences. Karen had made our children her enemy. And every time we ignored her, dismissed her, or laughed her off, we gave her permission to go one step further. It wasn't long before Karen stopped targeting the neighborhood in general and set her sights directly on my daughter. It started with something so absurd, it was almost laughable, almost. I received an official-looking envelope in the mail with the HOA letterhead. Inside was a typed notice stating that my daughter had been observed screaming excessively and displaying disruptive behavior within earshot of HOA residences during school recess. The kicker? It included a time-stamped photo of my daughter on the school playground, laughing, not vandalizing, not hurting anyone, just a laughing. Such behavior, the letter read, can negatively impact neighborhood harmony. My daughter was 6, and this woman had submitted a formal complaint because she was too happy. The next week, things got worse. Karen began showing up near the school fence more frequently, just outside the property line, pacing with her arms crossed, muttering to herself. One day, a teacher told me Karen had yelled at my daughter and another little girl through the chain link fence. "You're breaking the rules," she had screamed. "You're damaging community property." The girls were coloring on the sidewalk with washable chalk. Chalk! The teacher escorted the children away and told Karen to leave, but she didn't. She just stood there for another hour, watching. The school called me later that day, visibly concerned. They told me that while Karen technically hadn't trespassed, she had made staff and students uncomfortable. They advised me to file a report with the HOA, as if that would do anything. I did again. I emailed the board. I called the main office. I even spoke with a representative in person who said, "We understand your concern, but Ms. Karen is within her rights to observe community activity from public sidewalks." Public sidewalks. That was their excuse for doing nothing. Even though that community activity was a playground full of children. Even though she wasn't observing, she was harassing. My daughter started dreading recess. She asked her teacher if she could stay inside during lunch. She stopped running at the park. She flinched when she heard someone shout across the street. And every time I asked what was wrong, she'd shrug and say, "I don't like when that angry lady stares at me." It broke my heart. I tried to keep her spirits up, promised her Karen wouldn't be near the school anymore. But I was lying. Karen came back 2 days later. This time she had binoculars. She stood outside the fence like she was bird watching, only the birds were 6-year-olds trying to play tag. A staff member approached her, and she claimed she was monitoring potential trespassers. No one could make her leave. That week, I told my wife we needed to involve the police again. Something was off. Something was wrong. This wasn't just obsession, it was spiraling into something else. Something darker. Something dangerous. We just didn't know how close it was to exploding. That morning, my daughter didn't want to go to school. She wasn't crying or faking sick, she was just quiet. Too quiet. She poked at her breakfast, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, her eyes staring at the floor. "Do I have to go today?" she asked softly. When I asked why, she just shook her head. "I don't like when she's there." I knew exactly who she meant. Karen. I knelt beside her, reassured her, told her the school was safe, that teachers wouldn't let anything happen. I was trying to believe it myself. But even as I said it, something inside me felt off, like the air was too still, like the world was holding its breath. At drop off, she clung to my hand a little longer than usual. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her to be brave. She nodded, gave me that tiny smile of hers, and walked inside. I stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the school, then turned to leave. That's when I saw the car. Karen's SUV. Parked across the street, engine off, windows cracked, a dark pair of sunglasses resting on the dashboard. I couldn't see her inside, but I knew it was her. I took a photo with my phone just in case. I almost walked over. I almost knocked on the glass. But I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd already reported her enough times, that someone else would handle it. Around lunchtime, Karen was spotted again, this time by a teacher on playground duty. She was standing near the southeast corner of the fence, holding something, maybe a tote bag or a large purse, pressed close to her side. The teacher radioed the principal, but by the time anyone got to the edge of the playground, she was gone. But she wasn't gone. Security footage later revealed she had circled around to the back entrance of the school grounds. There was a construction area being renovated near the gym, temporarily unsecured. She slipped through unnoticed, blending in with the movement with the crowd. She wore a gray windbreaker and a baseball cap, and she carried that same tote bag. Inside it was a loaded 9mm pistol. My daughter was on the monkey bars, laughing with her friends. A teacher was helping another student who had scraped their knee. And in those few distracted seconds, Karen reached the outer edge of the playground fence. She stood there, hands trembling slightly, eyes locked on my daughter. No one saw her lift the gun. No one saw it, until it was too late. The sound came out of nowhere, a sharp, brutal crack that echoed across the schoolyard like a firework gone wrong. For a second, no one moved. The children froze mid-play, laughter still lingering in the air. Then came the screams. A teacher shouted, "Everyone inside," as panic erupted like a wave. Kids scattered, some tripping over jump ropes and backpacks, others sprinting toward the building in blind terror. And in the middle of it, my daughter collapsed to the ground. She clutched her side, a small hand pressed against her stomach, and blood bloomed beneath her like ink in water. Her face twisted, not in fear, not even in pain, but in confusion, like she couldn't understand what had just happened. One moment she was playing tag, the next, the world was broken. Karen stood by the chain-link fence, holding the pistol with both hands like she was posing for a photo. She didn't flinch, didn't run. She simply lowered the weapon, walked calmly to a nearby bench, and sat down. Just sat there, legs crossed, watching the chaos. Teachers were screaming into radios. The principal rushed outside. One brave staff member knelt beside my daughter, pressing their hands to the wound, shouting for pressure for gauze for help. The sirens wailed in the distance. Everything moved fast and yet painfully slow. I got the call while I was at work. There's been a shooting at the school. My heart stopped. Time collapsed. I don't remember the drive. I just remember running past yellow tape, pushing through officers, screaming her name. I found her on a stretcher, pale and still, a paramedic holding an oxygen mask over her face. Her eyes were closed, her unicorn hoodie soaked through with blood. Karen was already in cuffs. Officers had disarmed her without a struggle. She said nothing, didn't cry, didn't ask about my daughter. She just sat in the back of the police cruiser, staring out the window like she was waiting for a bus. And as the ambulance pulled away with my little girl inside, I realized something that chilled me deeper than the blood on my hands. She had planned this. She knew what she was doing, and no one had stopped her. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Sirens screamed overhead, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat in the front of the ambulance, staring backward through the small window that separated me from my daughter. A paramedic hovered over her, shouting numbers, checking vitals, adjusting tubes, and machines I didn't understand. Her face was ghostly pale, lips dry, and the bandages wrapped tightly around her abdomen were already darkening with blood. I just kept whispering to myself, "Please, please, stay with me." At the emergency entrance, they rushed her straight into trauma surgery. I wasn't allowed to follow. A nurse stopped me at the double doors and told me to wait. I collapsed into one of the hard plastic chairs, hands still stained with dried blood, legs shaking so violently I couldn't sit still. Minutes turned into hours. My wife arrived, her face white with panic, and we just held each other. She kept asking, "Is she okay?" And I kept saying, "She has to be." But I didn't know. After nearly 3 hours, the surgeon finally came out. His scrubs were soaked, his eyes heavy. He said the bullet had entered through the lower stomach, grazed her liver, and narrowly missed her spine. "We were able to stop the bleeding," he said. "She's stable now. But the next 48 hours are critical." Relief and fear crashed over me all at once. "We were lucky," he said. "If the bullet had gone just a few centimeters deeper, we'd be having a very different conversation." When I saw her in recovery, I broke. She looked so small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. Machines beeped beside her. Tubes ran into her arms. She had a breathing mask strapped across her face. And yet, somehow, she looked peaceful. I sat beside her, held her tiny hand, and promised her everything would be okay. I didn't know if it was true, but I needed her to hear it. Outside, the world exploded. News vans lined the sidewalk. Reporters circled like vultures. Local HOA member opens fire on elementary playground. The headlines were everywhere. Parents flooded the school board with calls. The community was in shock. How could this happen? How did she even get close? Why wasn't she stopped sooner? Karen was officially charged later that night. Attempted murder, illegal possession of a firearm, carrying a loaded weapon on school property, endangering the welfare of a minor, and unlawful entry. Police confirmed she had no permit for the gun. The weapon was registered to a distant relative who had passed away years ago. She had hidden it in her home for months, possibly longer. The shooting was not spontaneous. It was deliberate. The district issued a statement calling the act an isolated incident carried out by a non-affiliated civilian. But we knew better. Karen wasn't some stranger. She had been warning us, stalking us, testing the system. And the system had failed. My daughter survived, but something inside her changed. She jumps at loud noises. She asks if the angry lady is in jail. She still hasn't asked to go back to the playground. The days after the shooting were filled with police statements, medical reports, and nonstop media coverage. But what caught me off guard was how fast the HOA distanced itself from Karen. Within 24 hours, they issued a carefully polished statement. "We are shocked and saddened by the tragic events at the school. The individual involved was not acting in any official HOA capacity. We extend our thoughts to the family and community affected. Not responsible, not involved. Wash their hands clean like she had nothing to do with them." But I knew the truth. We all did. Karen was the HOA. She didn't just represent it, she was empowered by it. For years, she operated under their banner, enforcing rules, issuing warnings, and harassing families, all with the HOA board silent approval. And now, after everything, they wanted to pretend she was a rogue lunatic who had nothing to do with them? No, I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. I started digging. With the help of a lawyer and a few angry neighbors, we filed a formal information request with the HOA. They pushed back, delayed responses, claimed files were misplaced or under review. But after enough pressure and threats of legal action, they handed over a trove of internal documents and emails. What we found made my stomach turn. Karen had submitted over 80 official violation reports targeting children in the neighborhood. Yes, children. Everything from unsupervised sidewalk play to improper use of scooters to emotional disturbances caused by shouting. The language was cold, clinical, and terrifying. Many of these reports included photos, zoomed in shots of kids from behind fences or through bushes. Most of the time, she cited HOA rule numbers that didn't even exist. And the worst part? The board let her. They filed her complaints. They discussed them in meetings. Not once, did anyone try to stop her. Then came the emails. One in particular from the HOA vice president chilled me to my core. It read, Karen's behavior is escalating. Several families have raised concerns, but she's keeping the neighborhood quiet and enforcing our standards better than anyone we've had before. Let's not overreact. That email was dated 6 months before the shooting. They knew. They saw it coming. And they chose silence. Another board member even joked in a reply, better a neighborhood watchdog than no dog at all. That wasn't a watchdog. That was a loaded gun waiting to go off. And they handed it to her. What happened to my daughter wasn't just a tragedy. It was a system failure. One built on quiet tolerance, unchecked authority, and the illusion of safety. The HOA didn't just let Karen operate, they enabled her. They protected her. And they helped create the monster that nearly killed my child. What happened on that playground didn't just shatter our family, it ignited an entire community. The morning after the shooting, our street was filled with parents, neighbors, reporters, and even strangers from nearby towns holding signs that read Justice for the Kids, shut down the HOA, and protect our children, not property lines. For the first time, people who had stayed silent for years stepped forward, not just to support us, but to fight back. It started with the parents. Over 24 families filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA, citing negligence, failure to act on credible safety threats, and enabling a dangerous individual with a history of harassment. Families who had never spoken to each other suddenly found themselves sharing the same fears, the same stories. A mother down the block had reported Karen for photographing her autistic son while he played on the front lawn. A father across town said Karen tried to fine him for letting his twins sell lemonade on a corner she called HOA regulated. Most of them had complained. None of them had been taken seriously. Until now. A petition soon spread online like wildfire, demanding legislation to ban HOA members from enforcing rules on public property, especially around schools and playgrounds. Within 72 hours, it had over 50,000 signatures. Parents from other HOA-governed neighborhoods across the country started sharing their own stories. Some eerily similar. It was like ripping off a Band-Aid. What happened to my daughter wasn't just an isolated case. It was a symptom of a larger problem: unchecked power, no oversight, and a warped sense of authority disguised as community care. Meanwhile, the district attorney announced Karen would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Her trial date was set for the following month. The charges were severe: attempted murder, illegal possession of a firearm, and unlawful presence on school property. Her lawyer made a statement on day one of court. My client suffers from long-term mental health issues and was under severe emotional distress. It was the beginning of a mental instability defense, the kind used to draw sympathy or avoid full sentencing. But the prosecution wasn't having it. They had footage, witnesses, a paper trail of complaints stretching back years. Her condition didn't excuse the choices she made. It didn't excuse the fact that she had planned this. I was asked to make a public statement before the courtroom cameras. I stepped up to the podium with shaking hands, looked out at the crowd of parents, and said, "No more silence for safety. We trusted the system. It failed us. My daughter could have died. She still wakes up screaming. And we are not going to let that happen to anyone else's child ever again." The crowd stood with me, not just in sympathy, but in defiance, in determination. The message was loud and clear. Karen may have pulled the trigger, but the HOA put the gun in her hands. My daughter survived, but something deeper was taken that day, something harder to repair than a wound or a broken bone. That playground used to be her favorite place in the world. Now, she won't even look at it when we drive by. She flinches at sudden noises. She has nightmares. Sometimes she clutches her side in her sleep and whispers for help. She's 6 years old, and she's learning to cope with trauma most adults will never understand. We're healing, but it's slow, and it's complicated. There are doctor visits, therapy sessions, and long nights where she asks questions I don't know how to answer. Why did that lady hate me? Was I bad? I tell her no over and over. That none of this was her fault. That she's strong and brave and loved. But deep down, I know she's carrying scars none of us can see. And yet, through all of this, we've seen something else too: kindness. Strangers have sent letters, gifts, drawings from their kids. A retired teacher brought us meals for a week. A group of kids in the neighborhood stood outside our window one afternoon holding signs that said, "We love you." In a world where one person can cause so much pain, it's easy to forget how powerful people can be when they choose to care. That's why I'm telling this story. Not to relive the horror, but to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because Karen didn't start with a gun. She started with small power and no consequences. She was ignored, enabled, and allowed to grow into something dangerous. That's the warning, and that's the responsibility we all carry now. So, if something feels off in your community, say something. If someone abuses their power, stand up. Don't wait for tragedy to make you speak. Because silence doesn't protect anyone. And sometimes being loud can save a life. Just when I thought everything had come to light, when Karen was in custody, when the HOA was being sued, when my daughter was finally out of the hospital, I got a call from our lawyer. "You need to come in," he said. "Now." I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't ready for what he handed me: a sealed envelope. Inside it, copies of a file from over 10 years ago, a police report, a psychiatric evaluation, a record of a previous violent incident involving Karen, long before we ever moved into the neighborhood. The file described a confrontation with a neighbor's teenage son. Karen had accused him of vandalizing a stop sign and tried to drag him off his bike in front of witnesses. When police arrived, she told them she was authorized to detain him as a community enforcer. She was never charged. The parents dropped the case after pressure from the HOA, and that HOA, the same one we live under now, the same board president, the same leadership. In court, things got even darker. During cross-examination, the HOA president was forced to read from internal emails, some of which clearly admitted concerns about Karen's behavior dating back over 3 years. One message said, "Karen is unpredictable, but she gets things done." Another chilling line from a board member: "If she goes too far, we'll deal with it then." They never did. And then, as we were leaving the courtroom, a woman I had never seen before approached me. She looked shaken, tears in her eyes. She handed me a manila folder and whispered, "You're not the only one. My son, he was next." Inside that folder were photos, statements, evidence of surveillance. Karen had been watching other families too, maybe for years. And that's when I realized this wasn't over. Karen wasn't a one-time threat. She was part of something bigger, a system built on silence, on fear, on people looking the other way. And in part 2, we expose everything. If this story shocked you, if you believe families deserve safety over silence, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to HOA Karen Shorts, because the next part of this story reveals what the HOA never wanted exposed. We're just getting started. Hit that like button, share this video, and turn on notifications, because in part 2, we're naming names, exposing files, and showing how one woman almost got away with something far worse. Only on HOA Karen Shorts. Real stories, real consequences. Justice starts here.